You're listening to Cornerstone West Los Angeles.
I hurt myself, as you gathered. One of the things you learn about crutches is that no matter what you do, they always fall. Good? All right. So, we're all here, so we can do the story now. I ruptured my Achilles tendon. Literally the one thing that the physical therapist in our church told me not to do. They gave me one job, and I didn't obey it. It means I'll be in a cast for 4 weeks, and then this space-looking boot thing for a couple of weeks, and then physical therapy for all the rest of the weeks. Now, we're all here, so let me just we'll do the frequently asked questions now. No, I did not do it dunking all over somebody. Thank you for thinking that. No, I was at the kids' camp, and I was just sort of hopping a little until I wasn't. That is the story of me rupturing my Achilles tendon. Yes, I am still able to make my coffee. It just takes longer. Thank you for your concern on that. No, my wife hasn't given up all hope. Her sanity is intact but frayed. Yes, watching my wife take in the garbage cans is the hardest thing I've had to do as a man. And so if any of you know a massage therapist or have access to a B12 shot or like a connection with a dark chocolate vendor, please let her know. That would help. And no, you can't sign my cast. There have been too many people reserving space, and it is now all tied up in my kids and Nathan Winston. So that's the story of my cast. Now, in a transition suggested by Pastor Matt, speaking of meaninglessness, Ecclesiastes. Clearly that worked. We're starting a series this morning on the book of Ecclesiastes, and it's a book in the Old Testament. It's a different sort of book, and it's somewhat appropriate that I'm sitting down and not going. I thought about going full flamingo, but that's not going to work, because the way this book works, it's very sit down. It's very give and take. It's very let's ask questions and come up with answers together. Let's wrestle with the difficult things in life. In that way, it's a little less like your average book of the Bible or an average sermon. And it feels appropriate to be sitting and engaging in this together this way. When I was a kid, a lot of kids played pretend. I just played pretend longer than most kids. So I did it until I was I want to say like 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade. Like when you're supposed to not be doing this anymore, I was still doing it with a couple of buddies. And it was always that same thing, where you're spies or superheroes or ninjas or cowboys. You're some sort of thing like that. And there's always an adventure, and I'm running around the backyard, we're making up all these things, and there's always good guys and bad guys. The good guys always win. You're always one of the good guys. This is how playing pretend pretty much works. And you look back, I do, and I wonder sort of, why did I do that? And why did I do it for so long? What did I get out of all of this? And I think everyone does it for basically the same reasons. At some level, playing pretend is basically a way of refashioning the world using your imagination. You sort of get to create a world where you're bigger than you really are, where you're more in control than you really are, where you get to make up the rules, or the rules are always simple and always work the way you think they should. And eventually, you have to go back to the real world and then, be a kid who's not a superhero and not a spy and deals with all the normal things in life. And eventually I stopped playing pretend. I think everyone here, give or take, stopped playing pretend, at least like in that way, because the more I look back on the kind of pretending I did, the more I realize there's ways it's still a part of my life and still a part of a lot of adults' lives. We still play pretend a ton. We just don't do it the same way. Like, we don't pretend we're spies anymore or superheroes. We play pretend that if you make all of the right decisions and work hard, your life's going to turn out okay. We play pretend like if you're a good person, then good things are going to happen to you. We pretend that getting really sick, that's something that only happens to other people. We pretend that if you eat a certain way and live a certain lifestyle, you'll live a long and healthy life. We pretend that if you follow a certain parenting formula, your kids will turn out just the way you want them to. We pretend that if you just had a bigger apartment, a bigger bank account, a bigger retirement fund, you'd be a little more secure in your life and feel better about it. We pretend that if you graduate college with a good GPA, you will find a job that will pay you appropriately. We pretend that if you make the right financial decisions, you'll have enough money for the rest of your life. We pretend that if you learn enough and you're smart enough, you'll be able to figure life out. We play pretend that if you get ahead on all your to-dos this week, next week will feel a little less heavy. We play pretend that if you study your Bible enough and pray enough, suffering won't hurt as much. We pretend that if you don't think about death, it won't really be a factor in your life. We're a people who play pretend constantly. And when you look at all the ways you play pretend now, you realize it's for the exact same reasons that we played pretend when we were kids. It's a way of refashioning the world into what you want it to look like. It's a way of being bigger, more in control, of knowing the rules and knowing how to make life what you want it to be. But the problem is, just like being a kid, at some point, you have to stop playing pretend because the real world kind of invades. And so you do work hard, you do make good decisions, but someone else who's better at office politics gets the promotion. You pray all the time, and suffering still hurts. You make all the right financial moves, and a recession wipes out your retirement accounts. You get out of the right college with the right GPA, and you can't find a job for 2 or 3 years. You get all your to-dos done, and next week a new pile of to-dos that's even bigger shows up on your desk. You don't go do crazy, dumb things as a 37-year-old, and you still tear your Achilles tendon. You eat healthy your whole life, and you get cancer at 38. Life comes in. And for a lot of us, when that happens, we get surprised, because at some point, we kind of thought that as adults, the pretend world was the real world. And so as soon as we can stop having the real world invade, we kind of retreat back to, okay, well, that was that one time, but the rest of life will go according to my pretend rules. Ecclesiastes, this book we're going to look at, is basically the antidote to a life playing pretend. It forces you to stop playing pretend about what the world's really like. And it's going to teach us that actually that playing pretend, that's where we think, we think that life is better if that's the way the world was. If we can just keep playing pretend, then everything would be better. But Ecclesiastes is going to say, no, that's not the path to joy. The path to joy is seeing what the world is really like and seeing the God who's above the sun, who loves you and will take care of you. This is the path to joy. It's going to lead us to find joy without denying what the world is really like. So, we're going to read it. Now, let me brace you. It does this in a way that's very different than other books of the Bible. And you'll hear it in the first verses. We're going to read chapter 1, verses 1 through 11. Oh, it's on page 553 of your pew Bibles, I believe. Here, and it'll be on the screen as well. Here's Ecclesiastes. The words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities. All is vanity. What does man gain by all the toil at which he toils under the sun? A generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises and the sun goes down and hastens to the place where it rises. The wind blows to the south and goes around to the north. Around and around goes the wind, and on its circuits the wind returns. All streams run to the sea, but the sea is not full. To the place where the streams flow, there they flow again. All things are full of weariness. A man cannot utter it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. What has been is what will be, and what has been done is what will be done, and there is nothing new under the sun. Is there a thing of which it is said, see, this is new? It has been already in the ages before us. There is no remembrance of former things, nor will there be any remembrance of later things yet to be among those who come after. This is the word of the Lord. And it's a strange word. It opens, these are the words of the preacher, and historically people think this is Solomon, King Solomon, mainly because that phrase, the son of David, king in Jerusalem, he never quite comes out and says it's Solomon, and so what we'll do for the rest of the book is call him what he calls himself. We'll call him the preacher. And this preacher comes bringing words. So he's a preacher, he's here to proclaim something, but what he proclaims is not what we're used to. The word preacher means essentially today what it means back then. It's someone who, there's an assembly gathered, someone's going to get up and talk to them. And so imagine, you're coming here, everyone's together, there's someone that's going to come up and do the Bible teaching, and the guy comes up, and his introduction is vanity. All is vanity. It's just not the normal thing that we're used to. And it makes the book difficult for a lot of us. For some people, it's refreshing. For a lot of people, it's just weird. Because we typically like our Bible encouraging and optimistic and relatively easy to follow, like simple to understand. And Ecclesiastes comes and is none of those things. It feels sort of like sanctified pessimism. It's like you sort of, it's like you ordered a Diet Coke. Going to do a devotional in Ecclesiastes is like ordering a Diet Coke and someone hands you moonshine. Like it's just like it's hot. Or you want to go see a TED Talk and some weird-looking guy gets on and says, "Who cares? We're all going to die." It's like, well, I wasn't here for that. Like I was here for something else. This is what Ecclesiastes does in the middle of the Bible. It comes after Proverbs. It's which is right after Psalms. Like there's all this stuff that makes it a little strange, but that's exactly what this guy's trying to do. That's his point. He's trying to push us to avoid pat answers. He's trying to push us to see the world as it really is. And he's not just a cynic. He's not trying to come in and just be a huge downer. He's just not willing to let us live our lives playing pretend. He's going to ask us hard questions. And those hard questions are going to point all of us, religious or not religious, all of us are going to have to confront some difficult things because we're all going to find that we have a habit of avoiding what the world is really like. And so his point, essentially, is that pretending is not the way to joy. The path to joy starts by seeing what the world is really like, and that's what this first section teaches us. That's his introduction. What is the world really like? In some ways, that's the whole book. Now, typically, this is the point where I say, we're going to learn 3 things. Here's the deal. Ecclesiastes defies that kind of structure making. Typically, the reason I like to do that is because it allows us to say, let's get our arms around a topic. And there's a lot of validity to that. Ecclesiastes, one of the main points of this book is that you're human. You can't get your arms around topics. And so it feels inappropriate to start trying and make it sound like we can. And so instead of giving us 3 points, what I'm going to do is go through this section. We'll see how the rest of the series turns out. But I'm going to go through this section and look at the big words. Because there are words in this section and phrases that he's going to use over and over and over again that encapsulate what the world is really like and how we can respond to it without denying or playing pretend. So the first word we're going to look at is in verse 2, vanity. Vanity of vanities, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. Different translations give you different words here. Some translations, it's meaningless. Everything's meaningless. Sometimes futility. It's all futile. The word literally means vapor. That's like the base of the word. And so if you imagine, vapor's hard to sort of conceptualize, but imagine smoke. Imagine someone with a big cigar with this really thick cloud of smoke that they exhale, It says life is like that. And so you think about that, okay, smoke, it's kind of beautiful in its own way. It sort of has these tendrils that go in every which way. And you can't really anticipate the ways it's going to move, and it's kind of here and then gone. Like it's super real, and then slowly, without really even noticing it, just fades away into nothing. And he says that's basically life. And at least a couple of those things are worth drawing out. One, he says, like a vapor, life is fleeting. If you think of that smoke, it's there, it's real, but then it's just kind of gone. And he says life is that way, the shortness of time. In the last 2 weeks, I cannot count the number of people who've had this conversation with me. Doesn't it feel like summer started like 2 days ago, and now it's almost August? It does feel that way. Months go by. Can you believe it's almost August? Can you believe it's almost September? We do this all the time. Did you know you only get like 70 or 80 summers? And the first 20 you don't really know what to do with? And you might get less. Like this is my 37th summer. And do you really think that my 67th summer is going to feel somehow really different? Like, look at all this extra time that has gone by. I can feel all the gain I've got. No, it's going to feel like this one. Talk to anyone as they age, decade to decade, and they'll say, it's amazing how quick it goes. Like the summer, like the month. Life is fleeting, he says. There's a fleetingness to life. But more than that, life is uncontrollable. And while fleeting is a big deal to him, uncontrollable is one of the bigger things he wants us to take away from this whole book. You know, when you look at smoke, it's really funny. You can't anticipate where it's going to go. You shouldn't put money on, oh, the smoke's going to go to the left. Like, you shouldn't do that. And you can't mold it or shape it. You can't grab it. In fact, if you ever try and push smoke, you know what it does? It laughs at you. Because what happens? You push it, and it comes right back around behind your hands. It's as though life is like that. As you go through life, it's not a controllable, manipulable thing. It doesn't come with a rule book, and oftentimes it defies your attempts to control it. This is where we often struggle with Ecclesiastes. Zach Eswine wrote a book on Ecclesiastes, and he was talking about it's like learning a language. He says, when you learn how to spell in English, what do you learn? Well, I before E, right? That's the rule. There are rules. And he says, and so you do the I before E test, and you go through all the words, and I before E, yes, 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 yes. And then eventually the teacher says, okay, but there's all these exceptions. So it's actually I before E, except after C, and sometimes Y, and in words that sound like A, like nay or way, and there's a few others. And you can get really aggravated at that and go, why do I need to learn all these exceptions? Anyone who's ever learned English knows this feeling. And typically other languages too. Why do I have to learn all these exceptions? Why can't they just stick to the rule? And Eswine says, Ecclesiastes is a book of exceptions. It's the book of the exceptions. He says, if you want to stick with just the rule, you can, but you'll be a horrible speller. He says, in the same way, if you never appreciate the exceptions in life, you can stick with that, but you're not going to really understand life. You're going to end up playing pretend. It can be an aggravating thing. I heard a couple guys talking about the book, and they were saying it's like you're in a Starbucks at one of those communal tables, and you have like Proverbs is there, and other books are there, and Proverbs is like, what you should do is you save your money, and then you're going to do okay in your life. And then Ecclesiastes is over in the corner just like, I know a guy. Saved his money, and then he lost it all. Wasn't his fault, it just happened. Then he died. Like it's just this guy just kind of around just going like, hey, guess what? There's an exception to all this stuff. Now, of course, should you save? Yes, absolutely. There are certain rules to life that God gives us in his word. But Ecclesiastes' point is, don't think that that's all to the story, and don't think that because you have those, you're somehow in control of life. Life is a vapor. You're not big enough to shape it. And that's how life is. I was at a foster care training a couple weeks ago. And last Saturday, holy cow. A lot has happened. And they asked the room, like, what are some things that frustrate you? And so all these prospective foster parents are saying different things. And one guy says, what frustrates me is when I do everything right and things still don't turn out the way they're supposed to. And I'm like looking at Ecclesiastes going, oh boy. Yeah, that's all of life. That's like how things typically go. You should still do things right. Sometimes things do work out, but you're not in control as though if you always do things right, here's this mathematical life formula, or then it does work out for you all the time, every time. And that's where the idea of vanity comes in. That's why it's kind of a good translation for vapor. Is you can see the vapor, it's there, but when you try and grab it, if you spend life trying to grab a hold of smoke and make it do what you want it to do, you're going to have a life full of vanity, full of futility. It's going to feel kind of meaningless. And so you can already see the kind of project that the preacher's going to be on in this book. He's basically going to challenge all the different ways we try and create meaning and purpose in our lives, all the ways we try and grab the smoke and try and shape it into the life we want, and show us that it all ends up being vanity. That's not the path to joy. You can't go that route. And that takes you to the next big word, which is in the next verse, gain. He says this a lot. What does a man gain by all the toil at which he toils under the sun? Toil is going to come up a lot too. We'll talk more about that. For now, just think about toil as activity. Like there's all this activity that you do. You wake up and you do stuff, and then you go to bed. You wake up, you do more stuff, then you go to bed. There's all this stuff, all this activity in your life. And he just opens the book saying, okay, so what gain do you get from all that activity? And that word gain is it's like profit. It's a business word. The idea is surplus or like leftovers. Like, what do you have to show for all the activity you've done? What do you get to put in the bank when you're done with all of your activity? What do you have left over? And the preacher's asking, essentially, in all of that activity, when it's all said and done, all of it's said and done, what are you going to have to show for it? What gain is there? My kids are past the cute asking why stage. Oh, Daddy, why this? Why that? Why this? Now it's into the sort of it's rebellious, why stage. Honey, stop putting the pasta on your sister's head. Why? Okay, this is a different why. It's not as cute. And it's funny because you think about that and you realize that we're still asking that question all the time. Like if I told you, hey, tomorrow, take the day off of work, meet me in Santa Monica. You go, okay, well, why? And I'd say, look, just do it. And what would you say? I mean, I don't know, I kind of need to know why. Like if I'm going to do all this extra activity, change my whole day around, like you're not even being selfish. You're just going like, what are we going to have to show for all that activity? You're basically asking like, what gain will there be for that? And you do that across your life. You know, if you're going to change jobs, you do it because you think there's more gain in a different job than the one you have. You're going to have more to show for that other job than the one you have now. You change cities, you change friends, you make plans, you cancel plans. All of it is like, well, I'll have more to show. I'll have more gain for this change that I'm making. And so everything in your life, and it's a decent question. It's not an immoral question. You're asking, why? What gain do I get from this? And all the preacher's saying is, okay, you do that for everything you do in your life now. Have you ever asked that question about your whole life? What are you going to have to show for your whole life? You pick a job, a city, you know, a friend circle because you end up with a sort of surplus, you feel like. There's something to show for it. You get to bank something. And he's saying, when you put all that together over the course of a lifetime, do you have something in the bank when it's over? And this ties to another phrase he uses a lot, chasing after the wind. You bring vapor and gain together, and he says it's like chasing after the wind. It's like trying to gain from chasing smoke. That's life. It's going to be futile. It's going to be vain because you can't, if you think about it, you can't really bank anything in life. You're not going to have anything like to show for. You're not going to have this big extra life bank account when it's all over. And that takes us to the next one. The whole rest of the passage, we're only in verse 3. The whole rest of the passage is just a giant illustration of this. He says, let me just show you by showing you what things are like under the sun. And that phrase, under the sun, probably is the most popular thing he says in the book. Over and over again, he uses this term, under the sun. In other words, what's the world like for us who live under the sun? When you look around the world, from the perspective of people who live under the sun, what's life like? What do you see? And he'll give us more, but in this little section, he focuses on like the activities of the earth and how they relate to our life. And he says, you know, a generation goes, a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. And he goes on to talk about, you know, the sun and the sea and the wind. He's basically saying, look, like how well do you remember, like, just go with your great-grandparents. Like, how significant are they in your life and in the world that you live in? Like, what about, like, your great-grandparents, your great-great-grandparents? Like, and those are, like, yours. Like, do you know anything about someone else's great-great-grandparent? Like, these generations, thousands of years of generations coming and going and coming and going. And is the earth really different? And he says, no. The earth's just been there watching it happen the whole time. And what's the earth been doing? He says, the sun's been going up and coming down, running around and doing it again. He says the wind has just been going around and around and around. And he's basically like, there's not like a net gain of wind. There's not like 10% more wind power when it's done. It just goes around and around and around. The seas, the water runs from streams to the ocean. Every moment of every day, water is running. And he says, are the oceans like full? No. So what's the gain in all of this? And he's saying, this is life. Like, have you ever noticed that you clean dishes just so you can make them dirty again? It really takes the life out of dishwashing when the entire purpose is just to get them dirty again. Have you ever done all of the laundry? Like all of it? How long does that last? Like, have you ever noticed that you work really hard to have a good year? There's like a year-end report. You want the numbers to be good on that year-end report, and you get it done, and then the next day, it's a new year with a new report that needs to get done? Like, have you ever tried to learn so much about a topic? Like, you want to know, you want to really get your arms around it. And then, like, 2 years later, half the things you learned are obsolete. You got to start again. He's saying this is what the world is like. Have you ever noticed, if you're my age, have you noticed how like 5 years ago, oldies stations started playing really good music? That's the weirdest thing. Remember people like, there are people from even a few decades ago who were like such big factors like in the world. They felt like they were banking stuff. Remember Sugar Ray? Like, I'm glad somebody laughed. Most of you are like, sugar who? Some of you are like, what are the 80s? You're like, but that's the point. This is how life is. It goes around. What's the gain? What do you bank in all this? And he turns and says, see, just like nature, life is like this. All things are full of weariness. The eye isn't satisfied with seeing, the ear with hearing. He says, just how the ocean has all this stuff coming into it, but it's never full. He says, just like that, you're constantly looking at things and listening to things, but you're never satisfied. Like, just think so much stuff flows into your eyes and your ears, even on a given day. Like, take away all the conversations and the people and everything else, just on your phone. Like, how much stuff goes into your eyes and ears? And have you ever been, like, full? Is there ever, like, a final satisfaction to it, where it's like, okay, done. Finish the internet, like that kind of thing. No, and he says, look, what has been is what will be. He gets that famous phrase, there's nothing new under the sun. He's saying, you see, just like the wind goes around and around and around without any net gain, that's what history does. That's what progress does. We have phrases for that. History repeats itself. But we don't take it to the logical conclusion the preacher does. The more things change, the more they stay the same. There's a web comic, and it had this, I copied this one thing it did. It was actually just a bunch of paragraphs. It was talking about the pace of modern life. So it's like, we just got to look at the pace of modern life. And so here's a couple of the quotes. It's unfortunately one of the chief characteristics of modern times to be always in a hurry. In previous generations, it was different. From a medical journal in 1884. People are dipping into so many topics and gathering information so superficially that they're losing the ability to settle down and really think. That was an address to college students in 1894. Newspapers aren't trying to educate their readers and make them better. They're just developing bad tendencies because their only purpose is to make more money. 1898 from an academic journal. Children today have a great tendency to rebel against their parents and against any limitation. This fills us with great apprehension for the future. It's a book in 1906. Eventually we'll get to Ecclesiastes 7, verse 10, which says, do not say, why were the former days better than these? It is not from wisdom that you ask this. Everything, you search around and around and around. And that's just for complaining. That's just about complaining about kids and technology. Like, there's also, this is true about progress too. Like, basically he's saying, look, every generation had an iPhone. Every generation had a game-changing technological thing. Before the iPhone, it was the cell phone. Before the cell phone, it was the personal computer. Before the computer, it was the television, then the telephone, then the printing press, then the scroll and ink, then cave paintings. Everyone's done this. Like, basically, today's high fashion in 20 years will look like a mullet because it's all the same. It's all the same. This is what he's saying. All of life is like that. There is no remembrance of former things, nor will there be any remembrance of later things yet to be among those who come after. Gregory of Nyssa, 4th century. All the preoccupations of people with the things of this life is just children's games on sand. They take delight in the activity of their play, but as soon as they've finished building what they build, their pleasure ends, because as soon as their labor is completed, the sand falls down and nothing is left of their buildings. He basically says, look, the rest of the book is going to walk through other facets of life under the sun, but they all lead to the same conclusion. Life is a vapor. You're not in control of that. And if you don't see that, if you think you can somehow get gain from it or like bank something from it, you're playing pretend with your life. And that leads us to the other big word in the book that isn't actually in this passage, but you'll see it. I had to include it because you see it in the rest of the book. Nothing better. Because there's nothing better. He'll say it over and over again. In the midst of all this of life under the sun, all the vanity, all the toil for gain, in the midst of all this, I saw there was nothing better in life than blank. Now this is interesting because what he's doing here, in other words, given that life is a vapor, what's the best way to live? That's the question. And at some level, every time life intrudes, you can't play pretend forever. Eventually you kind of figure it out. There's always this lurking suspicion underneath all you do that there's a meaninglessness to what's going on, an uncontrollability, a vapor to this. And he says, at some point, you cope with it somehow. You come up with these answers. There's nothing better than this. Here's how to live, the best way to live, given that life is a vapor. And today, the most popular one by far is the one that says you got to make your own meaning. Okay, there might not be this overarching meaning to life, sure. In 1,000 years, maybe people won't remember me, but I'm going to make my own meaning in this life, and I'm going to leave the world a better place than I found it. And that brings meaning to me. That's how meaning works. And so you end up, you want to leave a mark. It's that kind of thing. You want to have a conversation with someone that encourages them and that leads them down a better path, and you say, that mattered. That had meaning to me. And so you want your tombstone to say, the world is a better place because of this person. That's what you want them to say, when you die. And even, here's the thing, though. Even if you somehow spearheaded passing like a new law that fundamentally changed America for the better, eventually there will be no America. Eventually, no matter how good you want to make the world, eventually it's all going to go away. The sandcastle is going to fall down. And see, what the preacher's doing here is he's forcing consistency out of you. He's saying, if this is all there is under the sun, if that's really what life is, there's nothing above the sun, it's just under the sun, which is how a lot of people think these days, then there really is no meaning, and you kind of have to have the intellectual integrity to stand by that across the board. As one professor put it, he would say, really, at the end of the day, we are just a bunch of molecules bouncing off of each other and ourselves. Just a bunch of molecules bouncing. And we happen to catch the evolutionary ticket to the top of the food chain for as long as we're here, and then eventually we'll be gone. If there's nothing but what's under the sun, that's how it is. And so if there's nothing above the sun, just to try and put it simply, that means there was no meaning for why we're here. There's no meaning in where we're going, which means you have to conclude there's no meaning in what you're doing now. And Christians, we can be pretty naive as people sometimes, but I think it takes at least as much naivete to have the idea that you can be just a bunch of molecules bouncing, but your feelings of love and your ideas of justice and your life experiences matter at all. It's a really sobering kind of thing. And so if you say there's nothing better in life than making the world a better place and creating your own meaning, the preacher says, you're playing pretend. And I think you know it. And even if you say something like, well, I know there's no ultimate meaning, but I'm still in love with this person, and that makes me feel good, the preacher says, no. That's just your brain chemistry reacting to another set of molecules. So at some level, you see what he's doing. He's really undercutting us. And what's left? Is there just cynicism and emptiness left? What do you do? The preacher gives us an answer, but not one that you'd expect. Here's what he says. At the very end of the book, he says this is chapter 12. The end of the matter, all has been heard. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. For God will bring every deed into judgment with every secret thing, whether good or evil. It's fascinating. He says, you want to know the answer to meaning? Judgment. The thing you want more than anything is judgment. Do you know why? He says the antidote to all of this is realizing that there is someone above the sun and that God takes everything you are doing here seriously. There is meaning in all the decisions you make. There is meaning in the life that you live because eventually someone will call you to account for it. Eventually you will see how much it matters. Do you see what that means? When I was in 6th grade, there was this kid, Jim Beasley. Jim was a nice enough guy, and he invited me to come to this youth group thing that I did not know much about. And so I went, and they sang these raucous, loud songs about Jesus, and I was very off-put. But people were nice, and so I kind of kept going. And eventually I kind of found myself believing a bunch of stuff I hadn't really believed before. And then all of a sudden I was a Christian. And then I became a pastor. And now here I am on crutches talking to you about God. Now, what Jim Beasley did in that one random conversation one day 30 years ago, that mattered. To God, that mattered. See, do you want meaning in your life? Do you want to understand that there's a purpose to the life that you live? The only way you will get it, the preacher says, is if you stop playing pretend and realize there is someone above the sun. And not only that, but God does something more. Not only is this about God will bring every deed into judgment with every secret thing, not just that, but you see what God does is he sends down his only son, Jesus Christ, to come under the sun with us and to be judge in our place. It's what communion's about. It's what the Christian religion is about. It's the idea that the God above the sun loves you to such a degree that he would come down, take your punishment, so that you can be free and know that the God who is above the sun loves you that much and accepts you that much. and wants you that much close to him. This is the idea. We live life under the sun, but there's a God over the sun. And because of that, our life under the sun actually can be imbued with meaning. You can have joy because you know what you do matters. And you can stop trying to be God and enjoy life as a human being. And what that's going to do, now this might be the most important part of Ecclesiastes. Up till now, you might go like, okay, yeah. Okay, sure, got it. Especially as Christians, this is the part you need to listen to the most closely. That will renovate your life now in a way you might not realize. What he's pointing out is that if you really believe this, if you actually believe that there is someone above the sun and that Jesus came down in this way in order to save you, what you're going to find is that your life gets changed from being about gain to being about gift. Life is about enjoying gifts, not making gains. Here's why this is important. A lot of people, maybe all of us, at some point take Christianity and we say, you see, I could not make gain any other way. But I come to Christianity, and here now, this is how I can make real gain. What I want to do is actually be above the sun. I really want to be in control of my life. I want to be able to shape my life and know the rules and be able to make things go the way I want them to go. And I can't do that any other way, so I come to God and I come to Jesus, and he will give me the keys and the rules so I can climb the ladder, get above the sun, and be able to shape my life so that if I pray enough, suffering won't hurt. So that if I do the right things and raise my kids the right way, they'll turn out exactly the way I want, you see? What we've done is taken a lifestyle of gain and baptized it and tried to make it holy, tried to make it godly. But all you've really done is taken sin and made it Christian. The very first sin in the garden, what is this, for time I have to go quickly, but the very first sin, what does the serpent say? It says, if you disobey God, you know what you get to do? You get to be like God. That's such a weird thing to say. Aren't we supposed to be like God? Well, yeah, in a lot of ways. But the serpent was saying, do you see what you'll get to do? You'll get to be above the sun. You get to control the smoke. Eat this and you can make gain. You can bank your life. You can make it what you want it to be. And there are ways that we end up living, Christian or non-Christian, all about gain. You look at life, and ultimately it's about gain. It's about transcending your humanity. What Christianity lets you do is be better than human. You're not constrained the same way. You're not finite the same way. You know God. And what you need to do then is be the version of awesome he has called you to be. You go be awesome. You go, and you know what life becomes? It becomes about hacking. You life hack, but now it's Christian life hacking. You become one of the people who can profit, one of the awesome people that can get the vapor to obey. And so you read the right books, you do the right stuff, you take the right steps because you're going to make some gain because you know God now. Do you see? Now, it's good to read books. It's good to grow. It's good to pursue the things God's called you to do. But at no point has God ever come into your life and said, you know what I really want from you? Be more than human. In fact, he sent his son to become human so he could show us what it's like. Jesus himself saw the pain of loss and the joy of friendship. He enjoyed eating fish. They point that out in the Bible. It's fascinating how much God wants us to be human and how consumed we can be with being more than human. That's what we call the whole series, Ecclesiastes, being human. We can think Christianity will give us the pretend version of life, but it doesn't. It gives us Jesus in this life, under the sun. And it tells us that one day he will make all things new and he will be our son. But until then, here we are. And you know what that lets you do? It lets you live not for gain, but for gift. That's what the preacher is going to say. You know what he says? Look it up when you have time. Every time he says there's nothing better than, you know what he follows it with? Enjoying the toil God's given you to do. Enjoying the life, the family, the good things God's given you to do while you have them, because you might not have them tomorrow. Enjoying the breath you have, even if some things have gone. Do you know why? Because he knows that there's someone above the sun that loves you, that gives meaning to everything. And because of that, because you have an inheritance in heaven, because the gain was given to you by Jesus and not by you, you can all of a sudden relax and enjoy what an apple tastes like. Enjoy fish. Have a good conversation. Not try and be 20 places at once. Find yourself reading your Bible just to read the Bible and be with God and not to make gains in life. You can find yourself free of having to read about how to hack your life and just live your life. It's an amazing thing God has given us to do, to enjoy. Because Jesus is the one who makes all the gains for us, do you see? If life is about mastering the universe, then you will live the rest of your life playing pretend and in futility. You will never control the smoke. But if there is a God above the sun, the true master of the universe, whom you love and you know loves you, then all of a sudden, the tastes and the flavors and the sights and the sounds, they taste sweeter. The people look better. Everything gets sweeter. Because you know that one day, he will be your son. And in the meantime, you have someone that can walk with you through the life as it is, through life being human. And there's much more to say, and we'll talk more about this. But let me just show you this. How do you apply this? Every day you're going to be faced with some kind of aggravation. At the same foster care training, they said, there's a video, and the base of anger is fear. Fear of loss of control. And I'm looking at Ecclesiastes just kind of smiling like, so shouldn't everyone be angry all the time? like, if you're not angry, it's because you think you have control, but you don't. Then you get angry. So what's the response? What do you do? Every day you're going to face this. What do you do? The options are either you can go back to playing pretend or try your hardest to play pretend. Or you can look to Jesus and say, okay, the one who is in control of the vapor, that's the one who's good and who loves me enough to die for me. And therefore, I can walk forward and enjoy the gifts he's given me and walk through the suffering he's put in my life and feel it, and it will hurt because I am human, but he will be with me. It's like the sun. The sun goes around and around and around. No gain, right? In Psalm 19, it says, the heavens declare the glory of God. And it says, you know what the sun does? The sun comes out like a bridegroom leaving his chamber. Like a strong man, he runs his course with joy. It's rising from the end of the heavens, its circuit to the end of them, and there is nothing hidden from its heat. Do you see, you don't need to have some sort of gain. You don't need to bank life in order to have joy. The sun doesn't bank anything, but it rises and sets for the joy of giving glory to God in what it was created to do. And so too can you and I, being created to worship him and enjoy the gifts he's given us, like his son, but also food and each other and the hope we have in the life to come. Now, it's a taste. There's more to come. He's going to take us on a tour to show us this. There'll be more hard questions and more wrestling on our part. But at the end of it, those questions will push us away from pretending, and they'll push us towards Jesus. And you'll find yourself enjoying life more and trying to gain less because of what he's done. Let's pray. Father, we are, humbled. It's always so hard at these points to look at you, realize the size of you, and how often we try and displace you and try and be above the sun instead of you, and realize that still you love us, you send your son for us, you give your grace to us, you free us not to push us to be more than human, but to let us be human the way you designed us to be. Let this book show us that way, a way of enjoying the toil you've given us, a way of enjoying you, a way of looking forward to what we'll have in a new heavens and a new earth, where you will be our son. And we give you praise. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you for listening to Cornerstone West Los Angeles. For more information, please visit us on the web at cornerstonewla.org.